I want to pick on my colleague Aaron Eby a little bit. If we could somehow hear the thoughts inside his brilliant head, in addition to his many holy thoughts that I'm sure are always percolating, we would hear a constant chatter of terrible puns. Some of them funnier than others, but it's the way his mind works. It's like endless wordplay, just constantly going. And he says he filters out about 90%, maybe more, only lets a few through. But among those bad puns, he used to say regarding Purim, he used to say, "We have lots to celebrate." And that one was so great that it inspired Messianic cantor and musician Troy Mitchell to write a song titled "Lots to Celebrate." We do have lots to celebrate. That's the whole point of the story of Esther. Seemingly is about the random cast of the lot for Haman, the Agagite, the son of Hammedatha, the enemy of all the Jews, had plotted against the Jews to destroy them and had cast pur, that is, lots, to crush and to destroy them. And therefore, they called these days Purim, lots, after the term pur. So the casting of the lot, something that is supposed to be like a random number generator. It appears random by chance. But Solomon says the lot is cast into the lap, but its every decision is from Hashem. So I like to think of the story of Purim in those terms as a story about the tension between the seeming randomness of mere chance, symbolized by the random cast of the lot, and God's providence hidden behind the scenes. As has been pointed out today, God's name is never mentioned in the book of Esther. Instead, he's operating behind the scenes, in concealment, as Aaron already pointed out to you on the basis of another bad pun. "I will surely hide my face in that day, v'anoki astir." So this may be why it's now customary to wear a costume or a disguise. I'm not really sure about the origin of this custom. But did you know that on Purim, God also wears a disguise? He's also in costume. What is the costume that he wears? He dresses up as if he does not exist, as if events are dictated only by random fortune and misfortune and by mere chance, as the world appears to be. But despite all appearances in this world of concealment, God is involved behind the scenes in every little detail, in the seeming randomness of things. He is working things out in the background. This is what Apocalypse is all about, is the revelation of God working things out in the background. Because we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good. Our master says, "Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? And not one of them will fall to the ground apart from your Father. And even the hairs on your head are numbered. Fear not, you are worth more than sparrows." But he didn't say that a sparrow never drops to the ground. In fact, his point is that sparrows do drop to the ground, but not apart from God. So this doesn't mean that bad things are actually secretly good, and that bad, sometimes you hear this, but bad is bad. It wouldn't be bad if it wasn't bad. That's the whole point of evil, is that it's evil. But what it means is that God does not surrender the world to random chaos. He doesn't surrender the world to chance. And who can say? Might he not redeem what is evil for good? I mean, this is the center of our faith anyway. You take something like the crucifixion of Yeshua, the crucifixion of the Messiah. That's not good. That's evil. A cross is not a good sign. That's a terrible thing. But God miraculously reversed it for good. Likewise, in the story of Esther, God miraculously reverses the evil that was intended for the Jewish people for good. The Talmud says that on Purim, Jews are to celebrate Purim by reading the Megillah. Megillah is just the word for scroll. That's the Hebrew word for scroll. So reading the scroll of Esther. And there's a lot of rules. There's just a lot of rules involved in this. In the Talmud says, it brings up questions about who's qualified to read and who should be listening and when to read and what kind of scroll, what kind of Megillah and what kind of, even down to like the type of ink that it's written in. This is all detailed out. It's all important, and it's important to hear every single word, lots of rules. And then comes this noisy custom that we have and knocks it all over and by stomping on the floor and shouting and grogging with groggers to drown out Haman's name, which is not halakhic. That's not something that's recommended. It's a custom. But it's a custom which is based on the text we read on Shabbat from Shabbat Zachor. Remember what Amalek did to you on the way as you came out of Egypt. How he attacked you on the way when you were faint and weary, cut off your tail, those who were lagging behind you. And he did not fear God. Therefore, when the Lord your God has given you rest from your enemies all around you, that's that Deuteronomic statement. When the Lord your God has given you rest from your enemies all around you. What's the other mitzvah that's associated? When the Lord has given you rest from your enemies all around you. Build the temple, right? Then you should build the temple. And here's another thing you should do when God has given you rest from your enemies all around you. In the land that the Lord your God is giving you, you shall blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven. You shall not forget. So what's the relationship here? At first, the relationship might not seem obvious. What does this have to do with Purim? Israel comes out of Egypt. Amalek attacks the faint and the weary, attacks from behind, attacks the stragglers, attacks without fear of God. So Hashem says, never forget. Remember what they did. Blot them out. Who is this a mitzvah for? This turns out to be a mitzvah for the king, a commandment for the king. King Saul is the first king. And so when we have our first king, the Benjamite king of Israel, he gets the orders. Go annihilate Amalek. Go annihilate Amalek. It's the king's responsibility. Not only to go to war, which is one thing, to go to war against the Amalekites, but to annihilate them. This is one of the most deeply morally troubling moments in the Bible. There's a couple others like that too. But this is a difficulty. It was a difficulty for Saul too. Not a moral difficulty. Instead, he couldn't stand to see the cattle going to waste. There wasn't any human compassion here. It wasn't out of that kind of higher ethical compunction, but rather he spared the cattle and he spared the life of the Amalekite king, Agag. And that sin cost him the monarchy, which is how seriously God took it. Samuel the prophet came and finished the job. Jewish tradition, however, explains that just before Samuel hacked Agag into pieces, while the Amalekite king remained in King Saul's custody, one of King Agag's concubines conceived. And she later gave birth to a son, the last of the Amalekites, and the sole progenitor of the line of Agag, however you want to say it, the Agagites. And this is the origin story behind Haman the Agagite, the evil enemy of all the Jews who tried to engineer a genocide. Oh, you see, everything's connected. A genocide to snuff out the Jewish people. And he embodies the spirit of Amalek. And for that reason, the custom goes when we hear his name read aloud in the Megillah, which everybody tries to drown it out as God shall wipe them out. So today, there are no Amalekites. We should put that to rest. There are no Amalekites left. There are no Agagites. The Agagites are no longer a people. The people of Gaza are not Amalekites. We're all clear on that. The people of Gaza are not Agagites. Amalek is no longer a people to be blotted out, but rather Amalek in Judaism has come to mean a malevolent spiritual force, the relentless spirit of anti-Semitism, a spirit which has taken possession of the nations for centuries. In every generation, they rise up against us. So contrary to the slanderous lies told by the Free Palestine movement, Israel's war against Gaza is not a war of genocide. Israel is at war. But a war is not the same as a genocide. The word genocide means the deliberate and systematic destruction of a racial, political, or cultural group. If that was the objective, they could do it. It would entail deliberately killing as many people as possible. On the contrary, long-standing Israeli army policy has been to operate at a higher ethical standard in combat than the other nations of the world. Israel goes the extra mile to minimize civilian casualties. Contrast Israeli battlefield concern with life, with civilian life, leaflets, warnings, calling on the phone ahead of time, saying, you want to get out of that building. Knocker bombs, many other measures to mitigate casualties. Contrast that with the ruthless savagery of the way other Middle Eastern countries conduct military operations, such as Syria, Turkey, Iran, or even in our own history, Western powers. Consider the civilian casualties of World War II, when the Allies firebombed whole population centers in Germany, in Japan. Not to mention more recent efforts that some of us might remember, like the bombing of Cambodia during the Vietnam era and such. So suffice to say that the genocide charge is a deliberate lie that goes into the category of what Rashi says when he says what you feel in your heart towards your neighbor is what you assume your neighbor feels toward you. The enemies of Israel are the ones calling for genocide. Hamas, Hezbollah, the Muslim Brotherhood, the Muslim world. That's what from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free means. And October 7th gave us a clear picture of what that objective really looks like. Aside from Jews living in the land of Israel, the genocide of all Jews is one of the larger objectives of Islam. Islam is called a religion of peace because Islam teaches that there will be, like we say, a future coming utopian era of world peace. According to Islam, this will be established after all the infidels have been eliminated, especially the Jews. So don't you find it ironic that the people who openly admit that they intend to carry out A genocidal massacre of the Jewish people, as illustrated on October 7, are the ones accusing the Jewish people of committing genocide. It's inexplicable. It's a spiritual thing that's certainly wrapped up with the story of King Saul and the Amalekites and the story of Haman, the Agagite, the villain who cast lots to determine the most auspicious day of the year to commit a genocide. Ironically, if anyone knows the true meaning of the word genocide, it's the Jewish people, because the nations of the world have been trying to commit genocide against the Jewish people for most of 2,000 years. For example, during World War II, the spirit of Amalek possessed Eastern Europe, as we know, and inspired the Nazis to engage in a systematic and intentional genocide of the Jewish people. And during those years, the Nazis allied themselves with the Muslim nations, including the Arab population of Palestine under the leadership of the Grand Mufti. And they indoctrinated their Arab allies with anti-Semitic literature, and they promised to reward them for helping them kill the Jews. In those days, the Palestinian flag was not the watermelon, but a swastika. And at one time, plans were actually being drawn up for an Auschwitz-style extermination camp in Palestine. Now, as Jeremiah explained to us earlier, this is all part of an ongoing spiritual war that's referred to in the scriptures and in the sages as Gog and Magog, or Gog and Magog. The spirit of Amalek rises to unite the nations against the Jewish people from time to time, always mustering the nations for this war, the war of Gog and Magog, or the Battle of Armageddon, if you prefer. Rabbi Yechiel Tzvi Lichtenstein points out that the gematria for the Hebrew words Gog and Magog adds up to the number 70. This means that if you add up the numerical value of the Hebrew letters that spell the words Gog and Magog, it equals 70. And in Judaism, the number 70 represents all nations because in Genesis 10, the Torah lists 70 nations born from the sons of Noah. And this is why it says in the book of Revelation, Satan will be released from his prison and will come out to deceive the nations that are at the four corners of the earth. That's all of them. There are only four corners of the earth. Gog and Magog, to gather them for battle, and their number will be like the sand of the sea. Gog and Magog equals all nations, which, in my opinion, if you want to know my conspiracy theory, that is the involvement of the United Nations. In the synagogue, we read the Gog and Magog prophecies every year during what holiday? Do you know? Sukkot. During the festival of Sukkot. We read Ezekiel 38, Ezekiel 39, Zechariah 14. It's one of the things we study during the Festival of Tabernacles, during the Feast of Sukkot. Okay? So, we've identified a spiritual enemy and a spiritual battle. The spiritual enemy is Amalek, the spirit of anti-Semitism and baseless hatred. The spiritual battle, Gog and Magog, which is all nations turning against Israel, against the Jewish people. So how do you fight such a battle? With what weapons should we fight? This is a big question for us, I think. This is a big question. This is really Messiah, is the king's job to fight this. Well, here's what we do. When we read the Megillah, we jeer and make noise whenever Haman's name is mentioned in the Megillah. This is one approach. Another custom is for the reader of the Megillah to read the names of Haman's 10 sons in a single breath. Yeah. So when reading the Megillah, The names of the 10 sons of Haman, and the word 10, must all be said in one single breath. What is the reason for this? It's that their souls all departed together. Or to me, a single breath, a neshama echat, implies that the 10 sons were of the same spiritual essence. They all shared the same soul, so to speak, the same spirit of Amalek. So you go, and you read, also they killed Parshandata and Dalphon and Aspata and Parata and Adalia, Aridata, Parmashata, Arisai, Aridai, Vazita, the 10 sons of Haman, the sons of the sons of Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the enemy of all the Jews. When the list of Haman's sons appears in the Megillah, if you've ever seen this, you'll note that the names of the sons are written in the Hebrew text larger than the surrounding text, and they're laid out in two parallel columns. It really sticks out from the rest of the scroll, as if it's a poem or something. It's not a poem, it's just a list of names. Like I said, and the reader's going to read all of these in one single breath. And all 10 sons, it says, died on that first day of Purim, on the first day of Purim in Adar. But if you keep reading, when Esther goes in before the king that second time to request a second day of Purim, she also requests that the 10 sons of Haman then be hung on the gallows, which is strange since they're already dead. It's kind of like having, a prisoner beheaded and then confining him to his cell. So Esther said, "If it please the king, let the Jews who are in Susa be allowed tomorrow also to do according to this day's edict, and let the 10 sons of Haman be hanged on the gallows." They're already dead. Why does she want to stuck up on the gallows? Tomorrow. The sages explain, well, there is a tomorrow that is now, and there is a tomorrow which is later. In other words, the Midrash is hinting toward a future fulfillment of Esther's request to publicly hang Haman's 10 sons. A coming day of reckoning, a second Purim, so to speak, the tomorrow of the future, which is also called the day of the Lord, when God will pour out his wrath on his enemies and the enemies of his people. And there's a hint about this, I think, a hint about this future day in that list of Haman's 10 sons. As you look at the list of Haman's sons, 3 of the Hebrew letters are written smaller than the others. There's the Tav of Parshandata, the Shin of Parmashta, and the Zayin of Vaizata. Notice that those 3 letters, if you put them together, they spell the word Tashaz. That's not a word. It's not a word at all. But those 3 letters could be read as a date. Every Hebrew letter has a numerical value. Tav is 400, Shin is 300, Zayin is 7. If you add them up, you get 707. And it's conventional in Judaism to omit the millennium when the context is obvious, like the way we say, or like the way John Cougar Mellencamp might say he got his first 6th string in the summer of 69, meaning 1969. So from that perspective, in the modern world, the date 707 could be read as the Jewish year 5707, which began in the fall of 1946 on the civil calendar. In the fall of 1946, the Nuremberg trials were underway. 12 key Nazis, including those considered responsible for the Jewish genocide, stood before a military tribunal. These men were sentenced to death by hanging. One was not present at the sentencing, so his execution was suspended. Another committed suicide in his cell, which out of the 12 left 10 men that were hung on the gallows on October 16, 1946. One of them was a fellow named Julius Streicher, a favorite of the Fuhrer, publisher of anti-Semitic literature, including a periodical called Der Stürmer, and a lot of anti-Semitic children's books that really set the pace in the years before the war, really set the pace for German anti-Semitism in the lead up to the war and certainly during the war. He revived the old blood libels and pushed this anti-Jewish propaganda that remains, by the way, in circulation in much of the Arab world today in Arabic. You could say he embodied the spirit of Amalek. And after the trials that condemned these 10 men to hanging, there was an American reporter chosen to witness the executions, chosen by lot, by the way. And he wrote a description of the hangings, including the execution of Streicher. As the guards stopped him at the bottom of the steps for identification, he uttered his piercing scream, "Heil Hitler!" The shriek sent a shiver down my back. As its echo died away, an American colonel standing by the steps said sharply, "Ask the man his name." In response to the interpreter's query, Streicher shouted, "You know my name well." The interpreter repeated his request, and the condemned man yelled, "Julius Streicher." As he reached the platform, Streicher cried out, "Now it goes to God." He was pushed the last 2 steps to the mortal spot beneath the hangman's rope. The rope was being held back against a wooden rail by the hangman. Streicher was swung suddenly to face the witnesses and glared at them. Suddenly, he screamed, "Purim Fest, 1946. Remember Esther's request. If it please the king, let the Jews who are in Susa be allowed tomorrow also to do according to this day's edict. Tomorrow. And let the 10 sons of Haman be hung on the gallows. There is a tomorrow that is now, and a tomorrow which is later. That tomorrow day came on October 16, 1946. October 16, 1946 was not Purim. It was Hoshana Rabbah, the 7th day of the festival of Sukkot. Hoshana Rabbah means the great salvation. In the days of the temple, the last 7 of the 70 bulls of Sukkot were offered on Hoshana Rabbah. All 70 bulls together symbolizing the 70 nations. And that's one of the reasons that we read the prophecies about the war of Gog and Magog, the war of all nations, the 70 nations, during Sukkot. 77 years after the Nuremberg executions of October 16, 1946, brings us to Hoshana Rabbah 2023, the eve of disaster. October 6th. So what do you think? Is it all just coincidence? Just random luck? Just chance? A cast of the lot? Are we perhaps reading things into events that are not really there? Or is the unseen hand of the Almighty orchestrating events behind the scenes for the great salvation of His people? I choose to believe the latter. I believe that the year 1946 was concealed in the list of the 10 sons of Haman that were hung on the gallows. And God is also concealed. Just like the pun on Esther's name, I have hidden. That name, I have hidden myself. But a day is coming, a tomorrow when God's righteousness and justice will be revealed, and every eye will see it revealed. And everyone will be called to give an account for their deeds. Our Master says, nothing is covered that will not be revealed, or hidden, that will not be made known. So, do not be discouraged. Do not be afraid. Do not be dismayed. The king is coming to carry out the king's mitzvah, the defeat of the enemies, as Maimonides says, if he fights the wars of the Lord. There is more to be revealed. I guess we're all characters in the Megillah, but we haven't come to the end of the scroll yet. History is still unfolding. The scroll is still unrolling. We can cling to the confidence that God is faithful to his people. His unseen hand is knitting these things together, and there remains a tomorrow, which is for later. The day of wrath, when God's righteous judgment will be revealed, and he will render to each one according to his works. Until then, our job primarily is to wait. We wait, and we persevere, and we fight with the weapons that our master put in our hands, the weapons of love. Love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. Pray for Iran. Pray for Gaza. Pray for Muslims. Pray for the West Bank. Pray for the progressive left. Pray for those who hate us, not returning hatred with hatred, not returning curses with cursing, not reviling those who revile us, but bringing down into this world the love and the light of our Master Yeshua. May he come quickly. Maranatha, Maranatha.